Lawyers of Reddit, what is a detail that your client failed to bring up to you that completely lost you the case? Opposing counsel, isn't it true you hit victim in the face with a brick? Client, no. Marcus hit him with a brick. I hit him in the back with a piece of wood. He'd sent a photo of his wife's beaten face to his wife with a message saying something along the lines of this: "Do you want this to happen again?" He came across very well in court up to that point, but his mask slipped when that came out. A buddy of mine case as a public defender. A gal was busted on drug charges, and told him she didn't have any drugs on her when they arrested her. He thought, okay, we'll use that. Turns out, she didn't have any drugs on her when they arrested her because she just sold them to an undercover cop. My house was robbed. In addition to all the stuff the thief took, he also stole a bunch of my suits and all of my neckties. I had a big collection, like 100 or so. However, the thief left fingerprints on a hard plastic box that I kept spare change in. Fast forward 3 months, the thief is caught in the act of robbing another house in the same neighborhood. Same detectives on my case in this new theft. They fingerprint the guy and the fingerprints match the ones from my house. At the thief's arraignment, I see him stroll in wearing my suit and my tie. I tell the district attorney, he says there's really no way to prove it. However, the tie he chose to wear was a one-of-kind street map of San Francisco and I still had all the documentation to prove it. The district attorney's eyes widen, and he informs the judge. The judge has the thief placed under arrest again for possession of stolen property. The thief's lawyer was dumbfounded. It was a nice end to a rough situation. Lawyer in the UK. I acted for a member of a famous pedophile hunting group. My client was charged with various offenses relating to his vigilantism, most seriously, causing grievous bodily harm with intent. He wanted me to fight the case on a public interest defense point that is not available to him in statute or at common law, contrary to my advice. I followed his instructions as I'm bound to do. If the state won't punish pedophiles properly, then it's left to men like my client to take the law into their own hands. A horseshit argument for a whole host of reasons. His laptop was seized by police and submitted for forensic examination. He had a staggeringly huge database of child pornography on it. He himself was a massive pedo. Edit, spelling. Edit 2, spelling again. Friend of mine is a defense attorney. He was representing the guy with a lengthy record for assault. Basically, this guy took an AC unit and threw it at his girlfriend. My buddy tells me he was able to get a plea deal for 1 year probation, no jail time. The judge is all ready to accept the deal when he asks the defendant if he had anything he would like to say. The defendant responds, "Yay, I don't know why they charging me with assault. I never touched her. I just threw an AC at her. This is bullshit." Judge rescinded plea deal because of defendant's attitude/lack of remorse, went to trial and got a year in jail. Client said his ex owed him a lot of money and that she was trying to get out of paying him back by getting a protective order against him. Seemed reasonable, so I took his case. At the hearing, it came out that they were never a couple, that he was sending sex toys to her residence on a weekly basis and that she never asked for the thousands of dollars he gave her over the years. Stripper. We lost. He got laughed out of court and he learned a valuable lesson: tell your lawyer the good and the bad stuff before trial. There's so many. My dude in a custody battle where the opposing party claims he has a drinking problem and he denies it 1000%. Even after the real talk I have with him asking him to not hide shit from me, and to be honest, we go into court and at cross-examination the opposing party provides video evidence of him finishing work, driving to an abandoned parking lot to drink a few towel boys and then going to pick up his kid from school. Every single access visit. He not only didn't tell me that, he forgot to mention that his ex's brother owns a private investigator firm. Fucking idiot. Case as a paralegal. Negligence case. Client argued that a lack of street lights and a cyclist he couldn't see was responsible for him hitting a wire pole. Upon discovery, the first respondent's report indicated that they found the driver in the driver's seat, pants down, with porn playing on the phone. Wasn't difficult to figure out who was negligent at that point. Your Honor, if the cable repairman had simply fixed the cable in accordance with professional standard practices, my client would have had no other recourse but to keep his ostrich in the corral on the evening in question. Guy in prison hired me to request a modification of his sentence because he was doing very well, completing a lot of optional programs, no rule violations, etc. He had his family come in and pay and everything to get started. I asked the family and the client if he had requested modification before, because the law said that for his conviction, he could only request modification twice for any one sentence, regardless of if they were granted or denied. Swore up and down he'd never filed before. You can see where this is going. After spending a few hours going over records and preparing documents, a copy of the CCS, the case record basically, finally arrived. He'd personally filed for modification 6 times since he was sentenced with handwritten pleadings that were all denied. So the one he hired me for was a waste of time and would never be considered at all. We became a foster family about a year ago. We've had several short-term placements since then, and I always go to the hearings because that's when you can truly find out what's going on. Kid is put into care with all kinds of injuries that parent can't explain, but they all seem to happen when they're at work and the kid is left at home with family. It was very clear that the kiddo was being abused and neglected during these times, and their romantic partner was the only one there when these injuries were happening. Parent comes to court and lets us know that they've broken up with that person and we can give them their kid back now. Judge asks when they broke up and parent replies, "Just now before we walked in so I can get my kid back." Abusive person sitting next to them, drove them there, still living together, etc. Judge wasn't buying it. Not my client, but the son of the opposing party, and presumably the party himself, lied about being blind to make himself seem more sympathetic as a witness. We didn't know either until he took the witness box. Their counsel asked him to take the oath, and he picked the card up and read it. That was the cherry on top of a series of ridiculous events. The judge dismissed the whole thing in our client's favor shortly after. I was a trainee at the time, but my boss, who was in her late 60s then, said it was the most ridiculous case she'd ever handled. Credit card theft/fraud case. When I was a young lawyer back in the late 80s, I was trying this guy on a CC case and the witness was the department store clerk. Before video surveillance, the state relied heavily on witness identification. As she described the customer that was purchasing the very unique clothing her store sold, I asked her how could she be so sure it was my client. She looked at my client, who was wearing the most obnoxiously yellow shirt imaginable, and said, "Because not only does he completely match the description I just gave you, but he's wearing the exact same shirt I sold him." The jury convicted him, and I learned that day to better prepare my clients for trial. I am actually a lawyer, but I was only watching this trial, not participating. So the case was that woman A had hit woman B in the head with a heavy beer pint at a bar, and woman B got pretty serious injuries. The defense claimed that woman A had not hit anyone with the pint, but instead had just thrown the pint into a random direction, and it happened to hit B in the head, thus it was an accident and not a battery. Well, the prosecution had a CCTV tape from the bar, and it was shown at the trial, and the tape clearly showed in HD as A walked behind B, and smashed the pint to her head so hard that the pint shattered on impact. I looked at the defense lawyer and his jaw literally almost hit the table. The prosecutor also noticed this and asked something along, "Thrown, eh?" And the defense lawyer said that due to technical difficulties he couldn't get the CCTV tape open on his computer when he was reviewing the evidence. Woman A was found guilty. So yeah, I was completely dumbfounded. My father is a judge. I remember him talking about a case where a woman was suing for a severe back injury that she said was preventing her from working and taking care of her kids and so on. In the middle of the trial, a pen rolled off the table and she is bending over trying to reach it from her chair, but pen was too far away, so she stands up and bends over and picks it up and goes back to her seat as if nothing is out of the ordinary. My dad is just looking at her and she snaps at my dad and goes, "What are you staring at?" My dad asked her if she was okay and her response was that she was fine. Her attorney leaned over and said something to her and she then loudly started complaining about her back and how much her back hurt, but no one believed her. Lol. This one ended my marriage. Well, it was the start of the end of marriage. My husband lost his job in the title/mortgage business. Applied for unemployment, got denied. I decide to help him with his appeal hearing. I asked him multiple times before the hearing, "Is there anything you did that caused them fire you?" He says no, absolutely not, they fired him out of nowhere. Hearing day comes. He testifies under oath that he did nothing wrong, was a good employee, no issues. Upon cross-examination, the other attorney pulls out documents from one of his real estate closings, documents he forged and backdated. Had to admit he perjured himself. Needless to say, he didn't get unemployment and he didn't sleep at home that night. I had a client who, despite being a large man, had been domestically abused by his much smaller wife throughout their marriage. After the divorce, she turned her anger on their son. He ran away one day to live with his dad and we filed to restrict her parenting time and for a permanent modification. At the permanent hearing, she denied being abusive to the child or my client in front of the child, said she never threatened anyone ever, and that she never made disparaging remarks about my client in front of their son. What she didn't know, and therefore hadn't told her attorney, is that he had recorded multiple instances of her abuse. So I called my client back up for rebuttal and played an audio recording of her screaming at my client, threatening to break his face in, and calling him a loser, all while the child could be heard in the background begging her to stop. I looked over at the other attorney and she hit her face in her hands. We won. I'm still a law student and this happened during my first internship at a court. A girl among other people was charged with drug possession, but because she had thrown away the drugs and the police couldn't prove that she bought or owned the drugs, BC it could have been one of the other people as well who still had drugs on them. The judge ruled in dubio pro reo. He then asked if she wants to say/add something and this girl asked if she can get her drugs back. The defense attorney looked like he was about to get a heart attack. Edit. For those wondering, I know what in dubio pro reo means, but I wasn't sure if they use the term in other countries and tried to explain it if not. This happened in Germany. Unfair dismissal case. The client claimed to have been dismissed without reason or following procedure. After we had started the case, it comes out that not only was he given 3 written warnings but he was also called in for a disciplinary hearing before his dismissal. Don't lie to your lawyer. Not a lawyer, but going to law school. I worked for a defense attorney who did a lot of federal work. One of our cases was with this guy charged with sex trafficking of minors. We met him at the prison to interview him and he swore up and down he had nothing to do with this and that he didn't even know the girls. A month or so later, heaps of evidence from the U.S. Attorney's Office comes in and it's pages of Snapchat messages and texts between him and these girls, video confessions from every co-defendant and victim saying our guy was the ringleader, proof of him checking in/out of different motel rooms, etc. We showed him the evidence and he claimed his co-defendants were conspiring against him. He continued to deny everything and wanted to go to trial, but we repeatedly told him that would not be wise because of all the evidence against him. He ended up requesting a new attorney to be appointed, claiming that we were ineffective. To this day my old boss and I reminisce about how difficult this client was when we catch up on the phone.